Hello, everyone. Welcome to the conclusion of week 2, the beginning of week 3, depending on when you're watching, of the 2021 legislative session. I am Ben Shelton, CV&M Political and Policy Director.
I'm Greg Peters, CV&M's Public Lands and Wildlife Advocate.
So this week was our first full sort of legislative week. Usually the week that they gavel in is a little bit procedural, and they do spend a lot of time sort of figuring out the rules and figuring out how to pay for the session and all that kind of stuff. But the rubber kind of meets the road in the second week, and it definitely met the road this week. There's a couple things. So before we're going to talk a little bit about how this week was, talk about some stuff that got out of committee and report back to you on some of the things we were talking about in our last video. And then give you a snapshot of what's coming down the pipe next week, what you can expect to be hearing about and kind of dominating the airwaves and social media and stuff in the next 7 to 9 days. So, what I talked about last week was the community solar bill and how we were coming to a pretty big committee hearing in conservation that happened last Thursday morning in the Senate Conservation Committee. And I'm pleased to report that we passed out of that committee on a 6-3 vote. It was party line, which is a little frustrating. I think that we're building good inroads across party lines on solar energy, and we're starting to see a little bit more productive dialogue, but we're not all the way there yet. Community solar, we still have some partisan issues to overcome a little bit there. There were a couple of amendments to the bill that I'll touch on quickly, just so folks can kind of feel informed about what's in there as it moves its way through the process. The biggest change that went on was an amendment that was about midway through the debate, and the place that the RECs go to changed. RECs is renewable energy credits. So when you generate solar energy on your rooftop, there's the electrons which power your house, but there's also something called the renewable energy credit, and that is the credit for generating clean energy. This is actually like a commodity. You can sell that credit to your utility if they have an RPS, a renewable portfolio standard. They need renewable energy credits to satisfy that. So the common way that they get renewable energy credits is they build and generate their own renewable energy, but they can also, in some states and in New Mexico, get renewable energy that other people in the state are generating and buy those energy credits off of them and count that towards their renewable portfolio standard compliance. So the bill was introduced with the renewable energy credits, or RECs, going to the developer of a community solar project, so the organization that's kind of getting the subscribers and building the thing. Under the amendment that got put on, those renewable energy credits now go straight to that utility. So all community solar that gets built in the utility service area counts towards that utility's renewable portfolio standard. Ultimately wound up being a friendly amendment to keep the bill moving through committee. The other amendment that was put on was just a clarification for the co-op's participation, not a significant substantive change. And then there was an amendment that was rejected that would have made co-ops automatically in the program and required them to opt out if they couldn't participate, versus having them automatically out of community solar programs and having them opt in if they felt like they could participate. Right now, we've got that opt-in language, and that language is still in there. The amendment to change that was turned down by the committee. So community solar, Senate Bill 84 moves on. Our next committee is the Tax, Business, and Transportation Committee, formerly Senate Corporations. Now it's Tax, Business, and Transportations, TBT, now chaired by Senator Benny Shendo. I don't have a great estimate for when we'll be there. Probably no earlier than like the very earliest I could even conceive of it is probably next Thursday. So a week from, so this is Thursday, right? So this upcoming Thursday is the very earliest, and realistically, maybe not even there. It kind of depends on when the floor meets, what happens there, and what the agenda looks like for the TBT committee. But an exciting week for community solar, and an exciting week for a slate of public lands bills that Greg's going to tell you about right now.
this past week we were tracking 4 bills that affect New Mexico's lands and wildlife, and figure we're just going to give everyone a chance to couple quick hits on them. But before I get into that, just a quick reminder to our members, we always encourage anyone engaging in advocacy efforts with our legislators to reach out and thank them for their vote. Good relationships with legislators are helpful, and a quick thank you call or email can help better your chances of having your voice heard in the future. So the first bill up in the House Energy, Environment, Natural Resources Committee was HB 51, the Environmental Database Act, sponsors Gail Chasey and Georgine Lewis. This act would require the development, operation, and maintenance of an environmental database, map-based searchable website that would centralize and house the state's environmental data. The database would include info about the state's natural resources and land uses, as well as public health and environmental data from state agencies. The purpose of the project would be to provide the public, state agencies, and private industry with a comprehensive data repository to inform land use, development, and environmental management decisions. This common sense bill addresses the simple need for a centralized repository everyone can across the state can access. This will lead to more comprehensive and smarter land use planning in New Mexico by state agencies, more transparency for the public, and more equitable access to state data. HB 51 was heard in Henrik Tuesday morning, where it received a due pass on a 7-4 party line vote. It will now move into the House State Government Elections and Indian Affairs Committee. Next up, we have HB 57, the Prescribed Burning Act, with sponsors Matthew McQueen and Gail Armstrong. HB 57 briefly is based on a comprehensive final report from the Prescribed Fire Working Group established by House Memorial 42 in the 2019 session. The working group included participants from a variety of state agencies and stakeholder groups, and was tasked by the legislature with exploring ways to expand the practice of prescribed fire on private lands. The group found important relationships between liability, insurance, training, certification, permitting, and the use of prescribed burning. So building on this report, the Prescribed Burning Act addresses 4 key points. It defines statutory liability for private landowners and their private practitioners who plan and use prescribed burning on private lands. It establishes a voluntary prescribed burning training and certification program for private landowners and contractors. It creates a model guideline for counties and municipalities to use when issuing prescribed burning permits if they choose to adopt an ordinance requiring a permit. And finally, it establishes that certified prescribed burn managers are liable for civil damages if they're negligent in starting, controlling, or extinguishing a prescribed burn, while non-certified burners will be liable for double damages. So the bill makes burning by state sectors, private sectors, more responsible and the public safer from accidental damage from fire or smoke. Science shows we need prescribed burning on the ground more, that prescribed fire is cost effective, and this bill gives private landowners more options than they have now to protect their land, while it also helps us protect our natural resources, water supplies, and communities. HB 57 received a unanimous due pass vote out of Henrik, and it is now moving on to the House Judiciary Committee. Third up, we have HB 50, the Private Right of Action for Certain Statutes bill, sponsored by Georgine Lewis. This bill addresses the problem that current law does not permit individuals to sue companies that have broken environmental laws, leaving all of the burden of enforcement on the state. So HB 50 will allow private individuals, an organization, a company, or a government entity to bring a lawsuit in state court to enforce the requirements of existing environmental laws, regulations, or permits. The bill is modeled on similar private right to action or citizen suit provisions in federal environmental laws, including the Clean Air Act and the Clean Water Act. The bill will also allow private parties to bring an action against the state agency for failure to carry out a non-discretionary duty, meaning one that's mandatory under law. HB 50 would help hold polluters more accountable and therefore better protect New Mexico's land, water, and air. The bill was heard in Henrik and received a due pass vote, and it is now moving on to the House Judiciary Committee. Finally, we had Senate Bill 120, the Youth Conservation Corps Procurement Act, sponsored by Senator Liz Stefanik's. This is a very straightforward bill that will exempt the YCC from a procurement code, and as a result, increase access to the program for tribes, small government entities, and nonprofits who wish to apply for a grant, and increase the YCC's efficiency so more money goes into hiring and training youth and improving New Mexico's natural, cultural, and recreational resources. This bill was heard in the Senate Indian, Rural, and Cultural Affairs Committee on Thursday and received a unanimous do-pass vote. It has been referred to the Senate Judiciary Committee. That'll do it on this. Ben, back to you.
Thanks, Greg. A lot of stuff happened this week. Lots of things moving. It's like not always easy as advocates to keep up with all this stuff, but thank you to Greg and the rest of our staff here. We're able to more or less keep our hands around everything that's proceeding. So that was the week that we just had, or the week that we had last week, and the week ahead of us is going to present a lot of really interesting stuff.